I was really fortunate in graduate school that when I started, Mahzarine Banaji, who's the world's leading expert on unconscious bias, happened to go from Yale to Harvard, where I was doing my PhD. And I immediately became fascinated by her work. It put a name to something that I never knew was a thing. I didn't understand that the human mind operated in these conscious and unconscious modes, and that as a result we could have explicit and implicit bias. And just having that vocabulary got me interested in how we could more deeply understand that psychology of the mind. It also fit beautifully with the work I was doing with my other PhD advisor, Max Bieserman, who studies ethics. And he was deeply interested in ways in which our ethical behavior sometimes is oddly out of kilter with what we believe to be true. And again, a vocabulary and a science from social psychology helped bring it all together. So the three of us were able to move forward on this topic in what we would eventually call bounded ethicality. Writing a book, a trade book for a general audience, was a completely new experience for me, very different than writing peer-reviewed scientific articles. It required using different writing muscles of trying to access metaphors, becoming an amateur journalist and interviewing real-world people to find stories that would illustrate the science and science that would illustrate the stories. It allowed me the freedom to go outside my own research. My book has got definitely my research in it, but most of the research I cite and curate and weave together comes from others. So I was able to dabble in sociology and psychology and economics and political science and history, all fields that are very foreign to me, but as an amateur, a visitor into their fields, I could bring this together. I also thought it was important that we not stick only to what we could definitively say with full certainty as scientists had already been studied exactly. I think there's certain things where we have enough in our research literature that we can make a logical argument to connect certain ideas. And that's probably the biggest leap I took that felt most foreign to me as a scientist, was to take research that Carol Dweck and her colleagues have done on growth and fixed mindset and say that even if every single study hasn't been run, we could still logically apply that work to the work of diversity and inclusion. And that was sort of where the work really blossomed for me, was being able to make that argument. So what my book does is bring together tools and strategies for understanding what unconscious bias is, for noticing where it shows up, for seeing its relationship to systemic bias, biases that may be baked into our structures and our institutions, and then beginning to do something about it, both where we see it in ourselves and where we see it in others. And it offers some tools and strategies along the way. We don't really know yet as scientists how to de-bias ourselves. We don't have that perfect recipe for it. So my book doesn't have that in it, but I think there's a lot we can do. We needn't stop and do nothing. There's a lot we can do. And what I'm hearing from readers of the book is that they're able to start acting now, even if they don't have perfect solutions. And if someone else points it out to you, there's different reactions we can have. And this is where the Carol Dweck's work on growth versus fixed mindset, seeing myself as a work in progress, always trying to get better, or someone who should already know how to do this. When we're in that work in progress mode and someone says, that joke, that was a little offensive, if we're a work in progress, we may be mortified, but we're going to listen. We're actually going to pay a lot of attention to what that person's saying. If we're in a mode of, I already know how to do this, I have figured out how to be a good person, so who do they think they are? They obviously are the one who has the problem. Then we lose that opportunity to notice something. So I'm on a campaign to get us to let go of being good people. Because I think that our desire that's so sincere and so central for so many of us to be good people is actually getting in the way of us being better people. And let me explain what I mean by that. For many of us, the definition of good person means you're free of bias and free of mistakes. Not a racist, not a sexist, not a homophobe, etc. And that's a very tight corner. It's a tight corner with no window, because there's no room for growth. There's no room for noticing. There's no room for unconscious bias. A goodish person actually is setting a higher standard for themselves because they're saying, I probably do have blind spots. The question is, what are they? How am I going to go find them? I'm going to take ownership for that process and for that learning. And I am, as a goodish person, going to make mistakes. The question is, what will I do when I make them? And so when I realize that I'm calling on male students more than female students, or when I confuse two black people for each other who look nothing alike, those are mortifying moments. I'm not proud of them, but the question is, what do I do next?